This morning's passage is from Deuteronomy 30:11-20. Surely this commandment that I am commanding you today is not too hard for you, nor is it too far away. It is not in heaven that you should say, "Who will go up to heaven for us and get it for us, so that we may hear it and observe it?" Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, "Who will cross to the other side of the sea for us and get it for us, so that we may hear it and observe it?" No, the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart for you to observe. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, and are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give you, to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob.
Thank you, Jane. So I ended up back in the emergency room this past week. Yes, I did. But unlike the previous time, the lawnmower incident with the toe, which was due to my own carelessness, this latest time wasn't. Instead, it was due to somebody else's carelessness. Late Memorial Day afternoon, I was finishing up a bike ride, only about a mile from home, when a dog that was loose and unattended to by its owner charged from out of nowhere. By the time I saw the dog, it was too late. The dog slammed into the front tire of the bike. The bike and I went flying. The dog did not. I landed smack in the middle of the street, resulting in a number of scrapes and bruises and some pretty noticeable lumps to parts of my lower legs and right hip. I managed, though, to make it that last mile back home. And when Cindy saw me, she immediately sprang into action. She increased my life insurance policy. No. Since she has become a pro after the lawnmower incident, she very adeptly cleaned me up, bandaged me up, and suggested that perhaps I should go to the emergency room and get checked out. But since I was able to ride the bike that last mile home and nothing seemed to be broken, I didn't. Now, this is the part where all of you women who have ever had a husband or a male partner know where this is going. At the beginning of this week, a couple of those lumps hadn't really gotten any better. So, after Cindy left to visit our daughter in Rhode Island on Tuesday, I went back to the emergency room on Wednesday. Oh, it gets better. Because once there, the doctor I saw was the same doctor I saw after the lawnmower accident. And, oh yeah, she remembered me quite well. After assuring me that the x-rays showed that nothing was broken and that what I really just needed to do was try to stay off my legs as much as possible for a few days to allow them to heal, she took a look at my now rather ugly but quite well-healed right big toe, looked back at the bruises and lumps on my lower legs, and said to me, "You are one tough son of a gun. But you might want to consider updating your will." She was funny. She had a great sense of humor. And she had a point. I think I will consider updating my will. Updating it regularly, in fact. Just not the will that she was talking about. The last part of the book of Deuteronomy, the part that includes the passage that Jane just shared with us, has been referred to by a number of scholars as Moses' will, his ethical will. Moses' declaration to his people, the ancient Israelites, of what he expects from them morally, ethically, spiritually, after he's gone. Because by this time in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses knows that time is short. It is short for the people in that they are on the verge of entering the new homeland that God had promised them and had led them to on their journey after being freed from captivity in ancient Egypt. But Moses also knows that his own time is short, that his earthly life will soon end. And so he presents his people as their spiritual leader with his ethical will, what he expects from them after he is gone. And what he expects from them is, in Moses' words, to choose life. To choose life. I have set before you the ways of life and prosperity, death and adversity, he tells the people. The ways of life and prosperity that he is talking about are the ways of God. The ways of God, which for his people are understood to be embodied in the religious law, the Torah. The religious law God gives to Moses for the people in the course of that journey to their new homeland. Moses says, what you need to choose life is right here. You don't need to look for it. You don't need to look to the heavens. You don't need to look across the seas. It's right there. You just need to follow it. To which there had to be somebody in the back of the room raise their hand and say, Moses? You mean We got to follow all those laws, all 613 religious laws all the time? That's a big ask, man. And yeah, it is a big ask. It's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask for anyone to do all of the time, to follow all of the religious laws, regardless of the religion that we're talking about. Just ask A.J. Jacobs. A.J. Jacobs is a writer, a journalist. And a few years back, he wrote a book called The Year of Living Biblically. And it was based on his attempt to live an entire calendar year following all 613 of the Jewish religious laws. How do you think that turned out? Jacobs relates in the book that not only could he not make it a full year, he couldn't even make it a full day. Not one day. But Jacobs also relates that he discovered not just that he couldn't do that for an entire day, let alone a year, but he also discovers in the course of all of it what Moses is really after, what the heart of Moses' ethical will is meant to move the people towards. The heart of what all of those religious laws, as his people understood them, were meant to embody and encourage. Love of God, not emotional love, but love as in loyalty and fidelity, to not worship other lesser gods, whether those gods were physical icons or those relentless, endless gods of wealth and power and fame. Love of God and love of neighbor. Love of neighbor exhibited through compassion and mercy and forgiveness and care for the vulnerable. That is the heart of what Moses' ethical will is all about. That is the heart of the ways of life and prosperity that God calls Moses' people and us to. And so choose life, Moses says to them and to us. So why? Why do we still so often choose the ways of death and adversity instead? And not just individually. When Moses talks about love of neighbor, that idea is nicely summed up, for me at least, in a verse from the book of Leviticus. Do not do anything that will endanger your neighbor's life. And the your is plural. In the Hebrew, it is plural. The understanding of Moses' ethical will is about both the individual and the community, the society, the nation. They are inseparable. Why then do we still so often choose the ways of death and adversity? Well, theologians and psychologists and philosophers have offered a number of reasons over the centuries. But I think most of them can be incorporated into three major themes, as I see it. Immediacy, nihilism, and ease. Immediacy, the inability to delay gratification. to delay having what we want or what we think we want in the moment for the sake of something better later. Nihilism. These are all related. Nihilism. The belief or the inability to see that there is, in fact, something greater than just ourselves. And ease. Ease. See, that's the thing about the gods of the world. They don't really ask anything of us, at least not right away. They only offer to give us what we want, what we ask for. But then, if we're not careful, if, for instance, we are unable or unwilling to delay gratification, if we are unable or unwilling to believe or see that there is anything greater than just ourselves and our wants and our needs, well, then eventually those lesser gods will ask a lot. In fact, they will demand a lot from us. They will demand our lives, our minds, our hearts, and our spirits. Wealth becomes greed. Power becomes abuse. Fame becomes narcissism. We go from having to being had, from owning to being owned by them. And the ways of death and adversity follow. Whether we experience them or turn a blind eye to the way they show themselves in so many ways. From anywhere from guns to golf. Yeah, I know. Sounds like a pretty strange pairing for a Sunday morning. But bear with me. Once again, this past week, this past Tuesday, there was another mass shooting. Another mass shooting at a school, at a high school graduation in Richmond, Virginia. But the problem, the real problem, wasn't the gun. Now, bear with me for a minute on this, okay? See, a gun is just a thing, an object, a tool, and it's a tool that does have its uses. I grew up in the country, in a house that had a gun. We hunted and we ate what we killed, like many people still do in this country, and some need to do. At the same time, in other parts of this country, a gun is needed or understood as needed in order to protect livestock from predators. Okay? It's not so much the gun as it is the worship of guns. The worship of guns that has become an increasingly part of our society. The belief, the insistence that I should be able to have as many guns of as many different kinds as I want, regardless of the consequences. But like I said, I don't want to abolish all guns. I do, however, want to abolish golf. And I say that mostly because of the soul-crushing way in which I play it. But I'm also a little bit more down on golf this week for a reason. Because also on this past Tuesday, on that very same day of that shooting in Richmond, the Professional Golfers Association, the PGA Tour, announced that it was merging with the newly emerged LIV Tour. From the inception of the LIV Tour until last Tuesday, the PGA Tour and its leaders had continually and consistently denounced the LIV Tour. Continually denounced it. They had done so for several reasons, but no reason more than the fact that the LIV Tour is funded by the government of Saudi Arabia, a government that we know played a significant role in 9/11 and in more recent times carried out the execution of Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist for the Washington Post who had been a frequent critic of that government. Up until last Tuesday, the leaders of the PGA Tour had accused anybody connected to the LIV Tour of having accepted blood money. What changed? What changed all of a sudden on Tuesday? Worship. The worship of money. Paul, in that famous phrase that often gets misquoted, does not say that money is the root of all evil. He says the love of money is the root of all evil. And he uses the word love in the same way that it's used here in this passage in Deuteronomy. Love as in commitment and fidelity to God. That's what changed. The recognition that by merging, everybody involved could make a whole lot more money, whether they even needed it or not. Immediacy, nihilism, ease. Or as Moses puts it in this passage, hear, heart, bow. To turn our ears and our hearts away from love of God and love of neighbor, and instead to bow down